So, you have connected Google Search Console with BigQuery. Now, it's time to write queries and work with that data. In this video, I will show you the first steps how to query the Search Console data, and then at the end of the video, I will share several ready-made queries that you can just copy-paste, add some minor modifications, and they will work just fine. In this video, I assume that you have already linked Google Search Console with BigQuery, so it means that the data is flowing, and you have waited at least for several days for some data to start appearing in the export. If you haven't connected BigQuery with Search Console and you have no idea how to do that, then I will post a link to a tutorial below this video. Watch that first, link your Search Console with BigQuery, wait for at least 3 days, and then come back to this tutorial. Here I have a project where I have been collecting data for 2 years. And here I see the Search Console. I can expand it. And then here I have 2 tables. One is the search site impression and the other one is URL impression. In this tutorial, I will be focusing on the site impression, which will show the keywords and how many times they were seen and how many times they were clicked. So I can click here. And then here we see the columns, the name of the columns that are in this particular table. There are also details, and you can click preview to see a little snapshot of what is stored in this table. What kind of data. So we have the date, we have the URL of the property, then we have the keyword. Some keywords are null, which means that they are anonymized. Also, it's worth mentioning that anonymized queries, they are not displayed or calculated in the interface of Search Console as well. And anonymized queries basically mean that they are very unpopular, or in other words, very few people search for them. And they potentially might contain some sensitive information that could potentially help you to identify the person. So having that in mind, Google is hiding such queries. Then we have the country. So each row in this table represents a particular keyword for a particular country, then the type of the query and the device. So for example, if in this country, this keyword is searched both on mobile and on desktop, then we would have 2 rows in this table for that particular keyword. And then here we also have the number of impressions, clicks, and the sum position. So for example, here we have impression 1, sum is 5. This means that the website for that particular keyword, which is of course unknown, it was displayed once in the 5th position. Here, for example, we have 2 impressions for another keyword and the sum position is 18. So basically we could divide this by 2 and the average position is 9. So this kind of preview helps you better understand what kind of data is stored in this table. And when you will be writing queries, it will be easier for you to know which particular columns or data you want to access. So let's try to query this data. While you are in this table, click Query. And this is a sample query. It is incomplete, therefore we get the syntax error. Maybe I should hide the sidebar to get more space. And here you can see that you can select certain, let's say, columns or keys in your table. Then this is the destination, or actually the source from where you will be picking the data, and then you can add some additional filters. For example, by default, it suggests to select the current date. But keep in mind that Search Console data appears with a 2-day delay. Therefore, if I try to query this particular date, I would not get any results because today's data is still missing. So to start with very, very basic stuff, we can enter an asterisk, which means anything. And maybe we should format this a bit. So we want to select anything, which means all columns, all available data from this particular source. And then we will also filter where the data date is this one. And then this request will limit to the first 1000 results. And here you can see the preview of how many megabytes or gigabytes or bytes this request will use. And as you can see, it's 0 because we don't have today's data. But I can select, let's say, 3 days ago or 4 days ago. Then I can click run. And before I do that, I can already see how much data do I have for that particular date. And that particular number of megabytes will be used from the free tier of 1 terabyte, which is a bit more than terabyte. So 3 megabytes here is not that expensive. Of course, later when we will be querying data more seriously, then we will not be using the asterisk. We will be picking just certain data points that we want to access. So let's see what kind of result will we get with this request. So I will click run, or you can just hit Control Enter on your keyboard. And this is what we get. We get the data only from that particular day. And we got all the possible columns that are stored in the table. And we got 1,000 results. Now we can remove this limit, and what you will notice is that the number of megabytes or gigabytes that are used did not change, because limit actually does not impact the size of the data that you're working with. It impacts the output, but in general, BigQuery will still take all the data for this particular day, and then if you use the limit 1000, it will just output the first 1000 rows, but it will still be working with the entire data from this day. Therefore, limit is not an approach that you should use if you want to optimize your queries and make sure that they use less data. So now if I remove this limit, let's see how many rows do we get for this particular day. I will click run, and now I get almost 36,000 keywords. And in fact, not keywords, but different combinations, because this keyword might be searched on web, but also another row might say that this keyword is searched on mobile devices or, something like that. And if for some reason you want to select all rows from all days in this table, you could just simply remove this where clause like that. And then you can see the preview that this request alone, this query, will use 3 gigabytes when it will be run. So this is quite heavy, I would say. And obviously you should narrow down maybe to the last 30 days or, just a couple of days. Now let me bring back the where clause, and again, for now, I will be looking just at the data of this particular day. So even though we have this raw data, this table in particular is not very useful, because let's say that I would like to see how many impressions did I get in total for this query right here, regardless of which country was it completed from. So in that case, we can remove the star and we can tell our query that we want to select only the actual query. So our request will return a table where the first column is query. So I just type query. And then in the second column, let's say that we want to include impressions or maybe clicks, whatever you want. But as I've said, the same keyword might be available in different rows, because in one country, maybe that keyword was searched, then maybe in another country. So we actually have to calculate the sum of impressions per keyword. Therefore, we can use sum and then we type clicks. Let's say that we are focusing on clicks right now. So when you type some clicks, you're telling this query that we want to calculate the sum of clicks per each keyword. But then we get an error that we have to do some grouping. Since our report is focusing on the query column, then we have to group by query as well. So let's see how this table will look now. Instead of all these columns, we will just have 2 columns, query and then the sum of the clicks. Click run. And this is what we get. We get the keyword, then we have a bunch of anonymized keywords, or actually just search queries, and then we have other keywords right here. I don't want to see this value because I don't care about anonymized queries. They bring no value pretty much. So I could add an additional filter right here, but I don't remember exactly what is the name of the column. So I can go to this table, and then in the preview, I see that the key is called isAnonymized query. So let's use that. In the where clause, we will add another condition. So I want to look at the data of this day, and then also isAnonymized must exactly match false. If you try to type false like this, it will not work because this particular key is Boolean, which accepts just 2 values, either true or false, but not with quotes. You can also go to schema right here and you will see that isAnonymized query is Boolean. So here I will just type false. So this will resolve and get rid of this particular row. Now let's also sort this from largest to lowest. That could be done by adding order by, and then we want to order by clicks, but here's the thing. I haven't named this particular column. I just use this calculation, but I did not give it a name. So let's give it a name, and then we will order by clicks, and then we can order from largest to smallest, and that is called descending. That's why we will type this. Now let's click run and see what we have. And here are the top keywords. And this table is sorted by the number of clicks, and at the top we see the most clicked keywords. Now we can do the same thing for impressions, because if you go to the table, go then to preview, you will see that we also have impressions. So for impressions, we can do the same thing. Sum impressions, and then we want to display this in the table as impressions. If you type something else here, then that something else will be displayed in the header, or in other words, in the first row of the table. So now let's see if this works. So click run. And this is how many impressions did we get and how many clicks did we get for that particular keyword. Let's say that we want to focus only on web traffic, or in other words, web queries. Then we can add another condition, but as always, I don't remember the parameters, therefore I will go to the preview and I see search type. So if search type exactly matches web, then that data will be included in the table. So we can type search type and then exactly matches web. Now if I run the query again, the numbers might have changed a bit. And in this case, if you want to see just the top 10 keywords, then you can limit this to, let's say, just 10. It will not affect the size of the query, but you will just have 10 rows in this table. So click run, and there you have it. I don't want to make this video too long, therefore some of the following things that I will show you will be just copy pasting with some brief explanations. But the next thing that we would like to see in this table could be the click-through rate. So for that, we could use this formula, where basically we are dividing the clicks by impressions, and then we will show two decimal numbers at the end. So let's run the query now, and this is the click-through rate. So 0.79 means 79%. Then let's add one more column, which is also displayed in the interface of Search Console, and that is average position. So for that, the formula will look like this, where we calculate the sum of the sum top position, because this column right here just sums up the positions for each impression of the keyword. For example, if we have, let's say, several hundred of impressions, then the sum top position will be quite large. And if you divide this by this, then you will get the average position. So in this case, the formula is that we divide the sum top position by the sum of impressions, and then we will also show one decimal point. And this calculation in the table will be displayed as average position. Now let's run the query. First of all, I always keep an eye on this and see if this query will work, if there are no errors, and then click run. And now we have the keyword, how many times it was clicked, how many times it was seen. If you want, you can replace them. I mean, you can change the order. So that could be done just by copying this and then inserting it right here. Then we see the click-through rate and then the average position. Now, what if we want to look at the data in a particular date range? Let's say between two dates. One of the approaches how you could do that is just to use this, where you, let's say that your date range should start here. So the date should be larger than March 1st. And then the end date could be some other date. Let's say March 24th, for example. So then, of course, we get more data. I mean, we will be working with more data. Therefore, the query will cost more. And now if I click run, then we will have more data. I mean, the numbers will be larger. We are still getting the top 10 rows, but I can remove that limit. Click run. And then I see that I have more than 45,000 different keywords. You can also have a more dynamic date range, because this one is quite static. I mean, every time you want to change the date range, you would need to change the dates right here. But alternatively, you could also do this, where you will be looking at the data where the start point, the starting date is current date, and then you subtract the interval of the last 30 days. But again, remember that you don't have the data of the last 2 days because Search Console dumps the data only of 3 days ago. Therefore, technically, this kind of date range will show the last 28 days before 2 days ago. I know it sounds confusing, but basically you will be looking at the 30-day interval, but you won't have data of the last 2 days. And now if I run this, the query will also work just fine. Now, to save you some time, I want to share several queries that you can just copy paste, change the name right here, and then that query will work. Some of them were already covered before, but basically just check the link below the video. It will open a document, or maybe in the future it will become a blog post where you will find various queries. So the first one was pretty much the same what we did already in this video, but I just want to show you how to use that. So first of all, let's close this. Then I will start a new query. So click query right here. And then first just paste it like this. Nope, did not work. So maybe this will work. All right. And then copy this, paste it right here, then delete this, and then select the date ranges. The start date and the end date. This will show you the data, and query, clicks, impressions, click-through rate, and average position of that particular fixed date range. So here you should probably replace with something like 2025, March 1st, and then 2025, March, and then, I don't know, let's say 7th. And if you run this query, here you will see your top keywords. Then we already discussed this, but I just want to quickly show it to you again. So here we have another query where we will be looking at the same data, but from the last 30 days. So here again, you could just replace this with this, and that's pretty much it. Then delete this query and the request will work. Then we can take a look at certain queries, and top queries, but only if they contain a particular text. So to do that, we can copy another query. Then I will replace this and insert it right here. Then I can change the dates, or if you want, you can use that interval that we used before. And then here you can enter the text that you are looking for. For example, I will be looking for Mania. And then I click run. And these are all the keywords that contain the word Mania, and this is how many clicks that I get, impressions, and so on. Then if you want to match multiple different queries, let's say you want to look for text Mania or analytics or something like that, then your query could look like this, where you just paste this code. And again, I just want to remind you that all of these queries will be available below the video. Not in the description, but there will be a link where you will find them. No sign up or opt-in is required. So you can just copy this, then paste it right here. Then let's delete this query. And then here you can write a regular expression. For example, I want to look for analytics or Mania, and then run. And this is what I get. And don't forget that even though in this table we have just several columns, you can still use other columns in your filters. For example, maybe you want to filter down just to desktop or just to mobile. So that could be also done, where you can add more filters in the where clause. For example, device exactly matches desktop, or, well, actually not or, but and. Country exactly matches, and then USA. Because if you try to browse this list, you will see that at some point you would reach the USA value. So now if I run this, this is the data that I get. And if you want to do something with this, for example, maybe you're a fan of sheets, and personally I am a fan, so you could save the results in a Google Sheet, or you can export it to CSV, and then maybe do something else with it. If you want to save this kind of query or any other query that you wrote for the feature, you can click Save and Save Query. Then let's name this, let's say Top USA Desktop Keywords or whatever, something like that. Click Save. And then it will appear on the sidebar in the Shared Queries section. So Queries, Shared Queries, and then you will see that query right here. Also, you can save that query as a view. A view in this case means that this data would be saved as a table, and then you can just quickly see what kind of data is stored in that table. So this is my project. In the data set, I will select Search Console, and then I can name this table Top Keywords USA Desktop or something like that. Click Save. And that view will be available right here. So you have your tables with data, but then if you click here, you will then see a different table that contains only that particular data. And then you could connect this view to Looker Studio, but that's probably a topic for another video, maybe sometime in the future. And that's how you can query Search Console data in Google BigQuery. If you found this video useful, hit the like button below the video. That will help me understand what videos do you like and what should I create in the future. Also, if you want to learn more about Google Tag Manager or Google Analytics or occasionally about BigQuery, then subscribe to this channel. My name is Julius, this is Analytics Mania, and I'll see you in the next video.